because if you mess with music, you're going to get sued. It's just a fact of life. It's just like patent trolls. If you run it, you know, we got sued at Imeem by patent trolls as well, just like everyone else. If you have any kind of streaming content, patent trolls will come and potentially sue you if they decide you have enough money. So yeah, and the other thing is people think they get successful. They're like, oh wow, I got all this traffic, I raised all this money. That's when you get sued. I talked to a lot of startup founders who are like, you know, no one's contacted us yet. The labels seem to be okay with what we're doing. No one, you know, we never really got an email, and I think they're excited about, you know, our user discovery platform. And look, they're not going to come talk to you until you have money, until you're successful. And that's the way it is. They have this whole like queue of startups that they track, and they take screenshots. I'm serious. And you just never want to get to the top of that queue, because when you do, you know, you're first in line, and then they focus on you. The other thing we really talk about is M&A is basically impossible with music startups. Okay, if you don't have deals, no one's going to buy you, right? They're not going to buy some huge legal liability, because that means they're buying themselves. That big company is now theoretically on the hook for a lot of money. And if you have deals, no one's going to buy you, because the deals are actually not transferable. The way every label deal I've ever seen does is that the labels have a right of first refusal to pull the deal if they don't like the acquisition. So everyone's been talking about board members and, oh, you know, what if I don't want to sell, or what am I going to sell? Imagine that in addition to your board, you had to go to approval from all the 4 major labels to get your company acquired, and they're going to look at the economics of the deal and decide if they're being fairly compensated for said deal. That sounds like fun, right? So really, like, either way, it's going to be tough, and the way to think about it is and this applies to more than just music, any kind of large content company. If you're dependent on someone else's content to survive, you effectively are not in control of the asset. It's not actually your company. You're a proxy through the company, but if the guys over here that control the content don't like what you're doing or want to take you down or destroy you, they can't. And that's really just not a place I would recommend being. So let's talk about why the label is so rational, because this is something I did not understand whatsoever until I spent a lot of time with them, and I totally see where they're coming from. If you went from an industry with a $15 billion annual gross revenue and cut it in half and just watched every year it go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and your job was to fix it, you know, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of money, you're an SVP or an EVP, you know, go be innovative, you know, go figure this out, you can fix this, right? So they're facing a very challenging thing, because they're trying to solve an equation, and the equation means bringing in several $billion every year. And frankly, they're a little emotional about it, because they're worried about their jobs. All their friends just got laid off. The labels have layoffs every few months. It's totally, you know, it's terrible. I feel for these people that have been working in the music industry their whole lives. These are real people with families, and their entire industry is being burnt down, okay? So they're trying to fix this, they're emotional about it, and then people come in with their, you know, ramen profitable startup that might be able to generate a few $1,000s next year, and like, it's like, well, we're just gonna get big first and focus on users, and then maybe monetize later, and, you know, we have Google AdWords in the meantime. You know, if you come in there and say something like that, you know, I think they justifiably, you know, it's not even worth their time of what their salaries cost, frankly, to even have that conversation. So they're trying to solve for these big wins. They're not trying to license a bunch of little people. They need to find, you know, the touchdown pass, the buzzer beater, so the whole thing doesn't get burnt down. And so again, I relate to that. That is what the world looks like to them. It is hard. I do not want that job. But, you know, this is a lot of the reasons that people tend to demonize the music industry so much, is they're dealing with these economic realities. And, you know, there's not a lot of options. And frankly, there's also a bunch of structural cash incentives here. So far over the past few years, music startups have effectively been money transfer schemes, where a lot of money goes into VC funds, they take their fees, the money goes to music startups, the money goes to labels. And this has happened quite a bit. This has also happened with video content sites, you name it. And it's been really good for the bottom line. The margins are really good on these kind of big cash things. You don't have to pay the artist or anything when labels take those advances. And the people that work at labels are compensated for short-term cash. Very much like Wall Street, people, you know, I'm really interested in what caused the bubble to burst in real estate and why all this irrationality happened. And the reality, in my opinion, is there was a lot of people optimizing for their own short-term benefit and doing what made complete sense. that would give them big bonuses at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, right? So everyone was like, well, I gotta make more money, I gotta make more money. And then the entire system that was building this money just fell off a cliff because there was absolutely no incentive to be thinking about the long-term strategy here. So this structural reason, I would suggest, is how we end up here, where now the labels are trying to find the billion-dollar deals and throw the touchdown passes instead of, licensing a bunch of three-person startups, which at this point in time, I agree doesn't really make sense. So when I talk to people about this, like, well, Dalton, what do you think? What's the answer? So I'm actually going to try to give it out today because I figured someone will ask me about that. I think you need broadly available legal music APIs that you can use as a developer to actually innovate off of. And I really tried to do this at Imeem. I got this license. We had a music API. It was not, it was not successful because Imeem's API is not on anymore. And so people, can't really build a company on something that doesn't exist. But I really saw this as the most important transformational thing that I could bring to the table in my company. I think that Congress has to get involved, much as they did with Pandora and DMC radio. You need to have statutory licensing so that there's a very clear way. If you want to do a music startup, if you want to do a music, you have to do check the following 4 boxes. Here's what the rates are. It's squeaky clean. It's statutory, so even long-tail content owners that are not owned by the labels, for instance, like the Beatles or whatever, that tend to sue on their own. Those guys need to get in line as well, because even if you do deals with all labels, you still can get sued by these long-tail people that own their own publishing and own their own masters. So additionally, you need to get that entire thing done internationally, because like I said, every single European country has a different licensing body. Can you imagine? And they all want their own advances, and they all have their own different deal structures, and it's very challenging. So to me, I think the solution is very similar to software licenses, quite frankly, where the government has to get involved. Sorry. This is kind of how I felt when it was over. You can take it for what it's worth, but